Hello, welcome back. This is Hans Guerin. I'm an art mentor and professional artist, and I'm going to be painting this leopard. So, unlike most of my demonstrations that are alla prima, this one I wanted to have a pretty funky sort of metal leaf background. And so I really wanted to map out where I was going to put the glue and slap the gold leaf down. So I wanted to do a pencil sketch first. So I'm drawing directly from the photo and just sort of playing with shapes, estimating, and doing very simple measurements of, uh, plumb lines, proportional measurements where I just compare any 2 points, and then the jigsaw puzzle of light and dark, which I'll do in just a second. But then once I'm happy with the preliminary sketch, then I know exactly where to put the glue and then slap these sheets of metal, metal leaf down. So with any subject that is really weak contrast, I'll usually consider making it backlit. Now the photo itself, if you rewind a little bit, you'll see that it's not backlit, but there's a lot of potential for it. So it had the weak light of the sky, and it didn't have direct sunlight on it, and I thought, you know what, this could be an opportunity for some gold leaf to be the backlight. So here I am taking a glue and putting it down on the board. I didn't have my regular metal leaf glue, so I just used GAC 100 golden acrylic colors medium, and that is a polyvinyl acetate glue. It's a very nice glue for this project, and I just used it as an alternative because I didn't have my proper supplies, but it worked just fine. So there I go. I smoothed out the excess. I was trying to be careful not to bring it into the kitty itself, but one thing I did very carefully was I applied the glue into the eye because I wanted to have a silver leaf eye. I thought that would be really cool. And so the process of applying gold leaf is really not that complicated. I have my glue down. I try to put it carefully where I want it and avoid where I don't. And then I take whole sheets and I just slap them down. And there'll be a little bit of excess. They'll overlap a little bit. It'll run off the edges. And that's no big deal because then the next step is once it's thoroughly adhered on there, I'll just take a rather stiff bristle brush and almost like paint on top of it, but all I'm really doing is just knocking off the excess flakes. I save those. There might be a few little repairs to do, and so even if there's no repairs, then I will save it for another project. So here I go. This one actually fell off the backing paper. I usually like to have the backing paper with me so when I put it down, it can go down smoothly. This one I just had to be really careful with because the leaf is super thin, and it's very easy to rip or bundle up. So no big deal either way. I can smooth it out with the brush. But here I am with the backing paper, just slapping down whole sheets. Pardon the camera work. I was really concentrating on the application. I wasn't looking at the camera. So, but you can see what's going on. I'm putting down these whole sheets. I'm not worrying about the edges of where the drawing are because that's just, there's no glue there. Nothing to stick to. And there I am using some scraps to fill in some gaps. So now all the gaps are filled, and I just give it a little while, and then I just run that rather stiff brush over it and knock off the slough. And so here's the reference again, and there's that gold leaf background. And so here I am. I just greased up the surface where I want to paint, and now I'm doing some preliminary drawing. I already had, the pencil still in place. It survived the medium. This would be the same process anyway of how I'd normally start a painting. Drawing the patterns that I see of, the major shapes, not the little, patchwork of markings on the cat. I do use those as proportional tools too, but I like to concentrate on the big shapes first. And I wanted to get a layer of paint down before I put this, leopard spots on top. Just something to not have to paint around all those shapes. So getting a body of paint down first does make me paint those spots on wet, which it's just a matter of the thickness of the paint. So if I put this preliminary coat down, which I'm doing now, I just want to keep it a little on the thin side. Now, I've been at this for a while. I know how to feel how much paint to put down, and thick and thin is relative anyway. Some people use very thin, like with solvents and things like that. My thin is maybe a little thicker than other people's, but then I'll just be conscious of going thicker when I want to put paint on top of it. Anytime that the brush gets thinner than the previous layer, it just starts to mix. But over time, you develop a feel, and especially with alla prima, where you really got to get it done in an efficient manner, right? You don't have the luxury of letting that sort of base coat dry and then put it on the pattern on dry. That's a really excellent way to do it, but it doesn't really bode well for alla prima. So I wanted to start the pattern in a place where I can just really have fun, right? So the pattern on the hind leg there, that's where the leopard spots get really big, and I can easily paint around those. It's the ones on the face that I wanted the first round of guessing to be what's in between all the spots. So here we go. So I've got a base, and I just start putting the pattern on top, being very conscious to go back to the palette often, where I know I'm going to load up the brush to be thicker than the previous layer, and that's not going to mix with the paint underneath and make this kind of weird mud, but it's going to make a nice firm pattern. In fact, the pattern is going on a little bit too bold to feel like the edges are made of fur, and I wasn't really worried about that yet. I don't really expect the finished product in the first round of brushes, right, and brushwork. I'm going to put down a body of information, usually what I see when I squint, and then adapt, because then I'll have some really good information to work with. So it takes a little while to build up this pattern. In fact, usually my alla primas are 3 hours. This one took 5. This one took forever. It's not particularly big. It's just kind of wanted to take my time with the pattern, and like I said, I had to be very conscious of the thickness of the paint. And it just, sometimes they just take what they take. My longest alla prima is 12 hours. I've done it that twice actually. Still one sitting. So the pattern that was actually pretty slow at first, just because once you get into a rhythm of it and you kind of know where you're going, and you're getting a feel for the spacing and the negative spaces, you get a rhythm of the pattern, see if there's any sort of trend to it, going from maybe thinner, smaller dots near the eye and getting a little broader as they go into the neck. Once I have that, I'm off to the races. It starts to become my pattern too, so if I'm a little off, as long as it makes sense and it's part of that sort of assessment of the trend of the leopard spots, then I'm good. Right? I don't need them all to be perfect. I just have to make it believable to somebody who's not going to compare it to the photo. The spots near the eye, there was a brightening that was happening there. And so that was a rare exception to where I wanted the paint to get a little bit weak and mix. So it kind of feels like the light is washing out the spots just a little bit. And, of course, all of it's an experiment. You put it down, you kind of see how it's going, you adapt. That's the thing with alla prima, is you start to develop a lot of tools, right? You know how to problem solve really well. You start to get a sense of strategy, and you get a lot of familiarity with different textures and paint mixtures and lighting sources and subject matter. It helps you as an overall artist. You don't have to be an alla prima painter to get a ton of benefit from alla prima painting. So this is my major skill builder. It's the one I recommend the most to people that want to get started. It can be frustrated if you're really product oriented. If you have to have a marketable painting that you put on your website, and you want to get adored by the legions of art fans that follow you and everything. Maybe alla prima is not the best way to go until you get a lot of them under your belt, but it's worth it. It's worth it. Even if you're a highly detailed painter, alla prima is worth it. You just build so many skills from it. And now that I've done a ton of them, I do get products out of them. I sell my alla primas, and they're popular because they've got that sort of spontaneity to it. They've got that brushwork. They've got that problem solving in there that usually leads to something creative. But it took me a long time to do this to where they were marketable. Still worth it. So you can see as I was building that eye, I didn't want the phthalo blue glaze to dull the silver leaf too much. So you can see me doing those little quick checks to look at it in multiple light sources. And that's the cool part about painting with metal leaf, is the painting changes as you walk around the room and the metal picks up the light differently. It's also the challenge because you not only need to have the gold work as brighter than pure white paint, but it also needs to work as kind of a middle tone too. And so those little experiments, this one went pretty well, but sometimes it's just like, well, how do I reconcile that it's going to be a radically different value in different light sources? As you walk around the room, your painting changes. And so far, so good. I've never gotten to a painting that I just couldn't figure out, but sometimes they took a long time to get there. This one, yeah, like I said, 5 hours. Most of it was on the pattern. So not all of it was going perfectly by this stage. I really didn't like how hard-edged a lot of the pattern was. Maybe a little too high contrast too. But my philosophy on even paintings that I'm going to take forever on is I like to just keep moving. I take guesses. I live with little things that I feel like are mistakes, and just keep moving forward. It's a huge advantage, and a lot of times when I get the whole thing blocked into that best guess, what I really wasn't feeling earlier might now start to look great because now it's in a better context. And a lot of times, even if I don't like it, even after the whole block in, I'll have so much to reference it to make the decision that it will get it exactly to what I want, or at least close. So I really recommend living with areas that you just might not be feeling yet, and you might be inclined to change them right away, or try to find some kind of detailed perfection in any one spot. I don't like to do any of that stuff. I like to just keep moving from that blocking and get best guess on everything, usually starting from that focal point and working my way out. But like I said, on this one, I started with that hind leg, which is clearly not the focal point. But I don't always follow the same pathway on paintings. As long as I get to that efficient, start to finish. And that even applies to the highly detailed ones. I still want to be fairly efficient, not at the expense of quality, but I don't want to waste steps either, or waste time with strategies that don't give me that clear direction of where I'm going. But also too, if you get everything blocked in, then you can step back, and you might even find that the painting might suggest some things that you didn't anticipate. And I really like having that dialogue with my painting. So here's the beginning of Whiskers. I wanted to do it in a place that was pretty safe to work on. Those ones going across the cheek, I really had to have a feel for it. So I wanted to start in the areas where I could get away with a little bit more, or I could just wipe it out and try it again. Those back spots were no big deal to sacrifice. But now we're getting into crossing over all this pattern work, and I really don't want to undo pattern work. So the first brush I was using just really wasn't getting me enough body of paint on there, so I switched. I went to a different brush. But this second brush was, it just wasn't giving me a fine enough line, and I was ending up trimming a lot of the lines with, that black fur. So as a third strategy, I switched to palette knife, where I could just kind of trowel it on there. I just have to be really careful. And by the time I got the body of paint down, the palette knife was definitely going to sit right on top of those. I didn't have to worry about it mixing and making a sloppy edge. And maybe I could have started with the palette knife in the first place, but in paintings past, I was able to get away with doing single lines with those thin brushes that hardly hold any paint. This one didn't work that well. So again, just when you build a bunch of problem-solving skills, then maybe strategy 1 doesn't work. Great, switch to strategy 2. If that doesn't work, switch to strategy 3. So you can really usually get through most situations. You just gotta go through those growing pains of making mistakes, problem solving, learning the fundamentals, and getting a lot of familiarity with layering paint and adding tools to the toolbox. So the orange glow that I put around the leopard here was intended that when the gold leaf wasn't active, I would still have a backlight. But it's dull and looks like refracted light when the gold is active. So refracted light works like this, where the light can pass through a little fur, and it might take on a little bit of the color of the light. So hope you enjoyed this. Subscribe to my channel. I love having people join me for the live presentations. We'll put out usually shortened versions of the lives for you to be alerted to if you subscribe to the channel, and tell your friends. Hope to see you the next time. Bye.